Welcome to a quick demo of Pliant. We're going to start by logging into the system. We're presented with a welcome screen that's showing us some basic reporting and then of course shortcuts to other components of the platform. Now we can get into a long discussion going through settings, into jobs, going to the workflow editor. We can talk about scalability and architecture, but you know what? To get things started, let's start through the Automation Center. Automation Center allows us to give other members in the organization or ourselves the ability to execute automation that has been built through a nice, easy to use graphical interface. So, in our particular case, we may be a level 1 technician who may be tasked to troubleshoot some routers. Now, as a level 1 technician, you may not necessarily be trusted with passwords and authentications into all of those devices. Therefore, a more senior engineer may have built a few workflows for you to use to get your job done without necessarily revealing the credentials to the system or allowing you to type in commands that may end up damaging or hindering the system if you mistype them. So let's go into, for example, a little folder here called Cisco Device Automation. There is a number of various workflows here that allow us to perform various basic tasks. So let's try Cisco get logs. In here, I can specify one or more router IP addresses and then click execute. And that would allow me to immediately retrieve the logs of the routers I have just specified. Now notice I didn't have to specify usernames and passwords. The fact that I'm authenticated into Pliant, the fact that this workflow is shared with me was good enough for the system. And therefore, not allowing the junior engineer to actually have access to those credentials. And we can look through these logs and obviously perform any kind of troubleshooting actions that we have to. Maybe even just updating a ticket or going deeper. This does not have to be as simple a task as I just showed you. Maybe resetting an interface or even resetting a BGP peering. These are more advanced tasks which still figure very prominently in many run books that would be great to be able to be executed safely by level 1 engineers. And with a platform like Pliant, we can. Now, because I'm logged in as admin, I can actually look at the workflow that's behind the scenes. I can click on Open Workflow Editor and see what this workflow looks like. There is obviously a number of parameters, and then we iterate through the routers that we have passed in, and for each of them we go in, retrieve the logs, and return them to the user with some comments along the way. Okay, so this was nice. So let us go into a little bit of a practical example and let's see what it takes to build a Pliant workflow. So I'm going to go here and say create a workflow. And let's imagine for this task that my CFO has asked me for a way to retrieve from Jira all the users that are in the system. So I'm going to call this workflow get all Jira users. Retrieve the users from Jira. Now, I don't have to give my CFO admin password. As a matter of fact, this could be beneficial from both a compliance perspective, but also from a cost perspective. He's never going to log into Jira to do anything besides make sure that we have provisioned, or rather deprovisioned, anyone who is no longer with the company. So having a workflow like this would enable him to perform those checks without necessarily ever having to log into the system or even having an account into a system he does not need. So let's go to Atlassian. Here is our Atlassian, and we go to Jira V3, and we look at users. So here's some users, and we're going to use an endpoint called get all users. We drop it in. We're going to call it get Jira users. Wonderful. So we have this endpoint get Jira users, and we're going to select an authentication key. So here is one authentication key we already have. And now instead of assigning to our result output variable, instead of assigning hello world, what we will do is actually assign the result of our get Jira users endpoint. There it is. So if I execute this workflow, we should be able to see all of the users inside Pliant returned, including whether they're currently active or not. So this is pretty awesome. So here is me, and I'm active, and this is great. So I can give this workflow to my CFO, and he will come back and say, this is nice, but you know what? Instead of having to go through the whole list every time we maybe terminate someone, we want to make sure that they're disabled. So I just want to be able to pass in an email and automatically figure out if that person is there or not. So no problem, we can make that happen. So we're going to create a new input variable called email, and it's going to be required variable. And now what we want to do, because there is no filter field in the Jira endpoint, in the Jira API code that they've provided for us, we have to do the filtering ourselves. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to toss in a for each to iterate through all the users. I'm also going to toss in an if statement to make sure that we stop when we find the right one. And only then do we want to return the value. Okay, so far so good. We're going to code this each Jira user. Wonderful. And we're going to iterate through the list. So the list here is going to be called get Jira users result, right? That's the list we already had. Now, every time we look at a particular item in that list, so here is each Jira user item. So every item we look at, we're going to check its email address and whether it is equal to the email address that has been passed in through our input. So here is email. And that should be it. All we need to make sure now is that the result value we return is actually the current iteration item. So get each Jira user item. So if I give this now a default value of say ves at Pliant.io and I run this workflow, we get only one record because it found ves and we can look into it and we can see whether he is active or not. Still active. Good. At this point of time, I have built this workflow, but coming in here and running it through this editor, not the best user experience. So I'm a bit of a developer, so usually when I want to access system functionality, I publish it as an API endpoint. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it to my CFO as an API endpoint. So I'm going to click deploy workflow. Now, this is actually a really amazing piece of functionality in Pliant, our ability to extremely rapidly deploy new workflows. It is actually so good. Endpoint to list all Jira users. Our functionality is so good, it's actually a bit anticlimactic because I just did it. I just turned this workflow into an endpoint. Now, of course, we can go ahead and go through security and go through compliance and logging and a lot of functionality, but let's just take it on trust right now that our API gateway is truly world class with all the advanced features you expect for every one of those categories. And we can go to APIs and we can click on my API and here's my brand new endpoint. It's already been provisioned. It's ready to go. It's ready to be called. One of the cool things we do is we give you a Swagger button right here and you can immediately see the documentation for your brand new workpoint. So here is the endpoint, here is the description, here is my input variable and I can try it. I can even try it right here from this documentation. I can go ahead and type in, let's get ves and run this. Excellent. Here is my result. Maybe I want to try somebody else, just to make sure that I'm not fooling around. Here's my co-founder Matt, and boom, here is his account. So it's that easy. We are able to very quickly deploy a workflow as a secure, documented endpoint with only a few clicks of the mouse. No editing of massive JSON documents or having to learn other bizarre languages. Now, this is great. And this is when my CFO says, Ves, I am not a developer. Contrary to popular belief, I really just want a button that I can press and I can see that user. Can you please just give me a button? And I'm like, well, silly me. Of course, I forgot who I was building this for. So now I'm going to go to my automation center where we were earlier. And I'm going to go back and, down here there is a personal automation folder that I built earlier. I'm just going to put this automation in it. So I'll click on the Create Tile button, select my workflow, which is right here. And yeah, I'll take the settings. I can upload a nice icon to differentiate it from other ones. I'll skip that right now, even though I strongly recommend that you do it for yours. We automatically get the description, the name, everything flows through automatically. Here is my default name. Okay, I like this. This is fine. Create. And just like that, here is a new button that I can now share with Peter and say, hey, Peter, every time you need to verify someone, just come in, type in an email address, and run it. And here it is. Here's the result. And you can do this every time you feel like it. So this kind of gave you a quick highlight, a quick tour of Pliant, what it's like to build workflows, what it's like to publish those workflows in a highly available system with proper logging. Every single thing that we just did is right in here. So here's my call. There's other things happening on the system already, but we can see that here is the call we just did. We can see who did it, when they did it. So we have compliance, we have high availability, support for very complex architectures, and of course, high scalability. For more information, I'm always happy to give a more in-depth demo.